The ships arrived quietly, as they always had, cutting across the eastern Mediterranean, heavy with grain, textiles, and the unseen cargo of a connected world. In the spring of 541, the port of Pelusium stood at the edge of empire, a gateway between Africa and the vast territories of Byzantine Empire. Trade had never moved faster nor farther. But this time, something traveled with it that no port authority could inspect, no guard could stop, and no ruler could command. Within months, it would reach the heart of the empire, overwhelm its capital, and begin a chain reaction that reshaped economies, populations, and power structures across 3 continents. What later became known as the Plague of Justinian did not announce itself with spectacle. Early accounts describe a sudden outbreak of illness, fever, weakness, and swelling, appearing first along Egypt's trade routes before moving steadily north. From Pelusium, the disease spread to Alexandria, one of the most important urban centers in the Mediterranean world, and from there, it followed established shipping lanes. Grain fleets bound for Constantinople carried more than food supplies. They carried rats and fleas, which modern historians and scientists widely associate with the bacterium Yersinia pestis. At the time, however, the mechanisms of disease transmission were not understood. Observers recorded symptoms and patterns, but lacked the framework to explain them. The historian Procopius, a primary source for this period, described the outbreak in stark terms, noting how it spread rapidly through densely populated areas and seemed to spare no class or occupation. His accounts emphasize confusion as much as devastation. Physicians struggled to identify consistent treatments, and traditional explanations rooted in imbalance or divine influence offered little practical relief. By 542, the disease had reached Constantinople, the empire's political and economic center. At its height, the city may have housed several 100,000 people, making it one of the largest urban centers in the world. Its infrastructure, including aqueducts, marketplaces, and harbors, was designed to sustain a thriving population. Those same features also facilitated rapid transmission once the disease arrived. Contemporary estimates, though debated, suggest that thousands were dying each day during the peak of the outbreak. Emperor Justinian I himself reportedly fell ill, but survived. His administration faced an immediate crisis, maintaining order, ensuring food distribution, and organizing the removal and burial of the dead. Procopius describes how traditional burial practices became impossible under the scale of mortality. Authorities resorted to mass graves and the use of fortification towers to store bodies when burial space ran out. These measures, while pragmatic, reflected the overwhelming pressure placed on the city's systems. The impact extended far beyond Constantinople. The disease moved along the empire's extensive trade and communication networks, reaching regions across Asia Minor, the Levant, North Africa, and parts of Europe. Maritime routes and overland trade corridors acted as conduits, connecting distant provinces in ways that had once been economically advantageous, but now accelerated the spread of illness. The interconnectedness of the Mediterranean world, often cited as a strength of the Byzantine system, became a vulnerability under these conditions. Economically, the consequences were immediate and severe. Labor shortages disrupted agriculture, leading to reduced crop yields and instability in food supply. Tax revenues declined as populations fell and productivity decreased. The imperial government attempted to maintain fiscal stability, but its capacity to do so was limited by the scale of the disruption. Trade networks, particularly those dependent on regular shipping cycles, experienced interruptions that reverberated across markets. The Byzantine state had been engaged in ambitious military campaigns under Justinian, aiming to reclaim former territories of the Western Roman Empire. These efforts required sustained funding, manpower, and logistical coordination. The outbreak strained all 3. Armies faced reduced recruitment and increased vulnerability, while supply chains became less reliable. Although the empire continued its campaigns, the pace and effectiveness of expansion were affected. The social impact was equally profound. Communities experienced sudden and significant population loss, altering family structures and local economies. In some areas, land was left uncultivated due to a lack of labor, while in others, survivors found themselves inheriting property or responsibilities unexpectedly. Religious interpretations of the outbreak varied, with some viewing it as a test or judgment, while others focused on acts of charity and care for the sick. Institutional responses differed across regions, reflecting local traditions and resources. The plague did not occur as a single, isolated event. Instead, it returned in waves over the following 2 centuries, with outbreaks recorded intermittently across the Mediterranean and beyond. These recurring episodes compounded the initial impact, preventing full demographic and economic recovery in many regions. The cumulative effect contributed to long-term shifts in population density and settlement patterns. Modern scholarship continues to examine the extent of the plague's impact, while earlier historians sometimes described it as a singular turning point that directly caused the decline of the Byzantine Empire. More recent research tends to present a more nuanced view. The empire persisted for centuries after the initial outbreak, adapting to changing circumstances. However, the plague is widely recognized as a significant factor that influenced its trajectory, particularly in combination with other pressures such as warfare, political instability, and environmental changes. Scientific analysis has provided additional insight into the nature of the disease. Genetic studies of ancient remains have identified the presence of Yersinia pestis, supporting the hypothesis that the Justinianic plague was an early recorded pandemic of bubonic plague. This places it within a broader historical pattern that includes later outbreaks, such as the Black Death in the 14th century. However, differences in context, scale, and documentation make direct comparisons complex. The broader Mediterranean world also experienced lasting effects. Trade networks that had connected regions from Western Europe to the Near East were disrupted, contributing to shifts in economic centers and patterns of exchange. Some historians suggest that these disruptions played a role in the gradual transformation of the late antique world into the early medieval period, marked by changes in urbanization, governance, and economic organization. In regions beyond the Byzantine Empire, the spread of the disease intersected with local conditions in different ways. In parts of Western Europe, where political structures were already evolving after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the plague may have reinforced existing trends toward decentralization. In the Near East, it coincided with significant political and religious developments that would reshape the region in the decades that followed. Despite its scale, the Justinianic plague left relatively limited contemporary scientific explanation. Medical knowledge at the time was constrained by prevailing theories and the absence of tools for identifying pathogens. Observers could describe symptoms and patterns, but could not determine causation in a way that would enable effective prevention or treatment. This gap between observation and understanding contributed to the sense of uncertainty that pervaded accounts of the outbreak. Archaeological evidence has supplemented written sources, offering insight into burial practices, population changes, and the presence of disease in different regions. However, the interpretation of this evidence remains subject to ongoing debate, particularly regarding the precise scale of mortality and the uniformity of impact across different areas. What remains clear is that the Justinianic plague unfolded within a highly interconnected world. Its spread was facilitated by the same systems that enabled economic growth and political integration. Ports, roads, and trade routes linked distant communities, allowing goods, people, and ideas to move efficiently, but also allowing disease to travel along the same pathways. The experience of the plague also reveals the limits of administrative control in the face of widespread crisis. Even a centralized and relatively sophisticated state like the Byzantine Empire struggled to manage the outbreak's consequences. Efforts to maintain order, provide relief, and sustain economic activity were constrained by the scale and unpredictability of the situation. In the centuries that followed, memory of the plague persisted in historical writings, though often without a clear understanding of its biological nature. It would not be until much later that the mechanisms of plague transmission were identified and studied in detail. The Justinianic plague thus occupies a place in history, not only as a major demographic event, but also as part of the longer human effort to understand disease. Its legacy is not defined by a single outcome, but by a series of transformations that unfolded over time. It altered population structures, influenced economic systems, and intersected with political developments in ways that continue to be studied and reassessed. Rather than a sudden collapse, it contributed to gradual shifts that reshaped the Mediterranean world. The ships continued to move after the outbreak, and trade networks adapted. But the conditions under which they operated had changed. The balance between connectivity and vulnerability became more apparent, as did the challenges of managing large, complex societies in the face of unforeseen events. The plague of Justinian stands as an early recorded example of how disease can move through interconnected systems and produce consequences that extend far beyond immediate mortality. It did not end the Byzantine Empire, nor did it single-handedly transform the world it touched. But it marked a moment when the structures of that world, economic, social, and political, were tested in ways that revealed both their strengths and their limitations. In tracing its course from a port in Egypt to the center of imperial power and beyond, the story of the plague reflects the realities of its time. A world linked by trade and governance, shaped by human decisions and natural forces, and subject to disruptions that could not always be anticipated or controlled.